I think what is very important for claims commission is that they are flexible and that they have to be created thoughtfully so that all the moving pieces are thought through very carefully.
Medieval crimes are being committed.
I come with clean hands.
Victims of horrific crimes want justice.
We don't have anything better than this.
This is Asymmetrical Haircuts, your international justice podcast, with Janet Anderson and Stephanie van den Berg.
All rise.
Hi, Steph.
Hi, Janet.
So we did a podcast quite recently with the executive director of the Ukraine Register of Damages, and I really encourage everybody to tune into that because it's really interesting to hear the detail of how they've done about it. But in this podcast, I thought we'd find out more about claims commissions, which is kind of another stage on in general. What do you know about this stuff?
Well, not a lot. I know there was the US-Iran Claims Commission in The Hague somehow, but I've never actually reported on it. We don't really cover that a lot.
Yeah, I had this real feeling that they fly completely under our journalistic radars. They don't get scrutiny from people like us. And actually asked our interviewee, as you'll hear later, maybe that's one of the reasons why they're quite effective, because they just get on with the job and they don't have annoying journalists checking on things. But yeah, that's not really what I suggest. But I managed to find out as much as possible with my interviewee, and we'll tell you more about her in a moment.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why they kind of fly under our radar is because they seem to take forever. I think the watchdog principle is very important, but it's really, really difficult to do when something kind of works so slowly. Maybe it would be better if we keep an eye on it, and then they might be pushed to hurry along a bit if they think that the big media is keeping an eye on them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, though, really quite a process thing, and we're not always brilliant ourselves at covering process. We like events rather than process. But anyway, at least for the moment, I got to ask some of these basic questions. I got an outline, really, of what claims commissions actually do. I managed to chat to Chiara Giorgetti, and I'll run through why she's an expert. But I first just want to say I had this huge Ghostbuster vibe with her. Want to set up a claims commission? Who are you going to call?
Chiara Giorgetti.
That's right. Call and response works really well there. She's a professor of law at Richmond Law School and senior fellow at Columbia Law School. She's the vice chair of the Register for Damages for Ukraine, and she's worked at the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission and at the United Nations Compensation Commission for the Iraq-Kuwait War. So she's really just this big expert on this stuff. So still in my rather undergraduate phase here, I just thought, it's so great to be able to ask the obvious. Please, Chiara, can you just tell me what is a claims commission?
This is a great question because, in fact, claims commissions are used but are not very well known. And it's quite interesting. So claims commissions are international claims commission, are ad hoc, flexible instruments. And they are normally created after an international upheaval, in general, after the war. So, for example, if you look at the Iran-US Claims Tribunal or the United Nations Compensation Commission or the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission, the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission is a very good example. That was created as part of the peace deal after the war between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Similarly, if you think about the UNCC, that was created by a resolution of the Security Council of the United Nations after Iraq invasions of Kuwait. Kind of differently, but similarly, the Iran-US Claims Tribunal was created after the overthrow of the Shah, and it was created in 1981, but also after an international upheaval. So it's slightly different, but still an international upheaval.
And so why are they created?
International claims commissions are binding dispute resolution mechanisms. And so this is very important. And their structure and act as a judicial body. They are international bodies, and they are created under international law. So what does it mean they're created under international law? They're created by an international legal instrument. So a treaty or a resolution of the United Nations or another similar international mechanism. So again, the Iran-US Claims Tribunal, for example, was created by a kind of a unique agreement between Iran and the US, negotiated by Algeria, the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission by a bilateral treaty, the UNCC by a binding resolution of the Security Council. So they are created by an international agreement. They are created to resolve a dispute, and they are created and they're formed they act as a judicial body. And what is interesting is that because they're very flexible, they can really target it. They are ad hoc. No claim commission is really equal to the other. So they are very specific. They are ad hoc institutions. And that, in that sense, they can have a very specific jurisdiction. So claims commissions vary in the sense of who are the claimants. Most claims commissions allow both individuals and states, and also companies, so individuals, both juridical and physical, to file for claims and compensation against generally the state. And in general, also, Claims Commission engage the international responsibility of the state. They are staffed by international civil servants. And those who are judges, arbitrators, or commissioners, however they're called, also serve as international and serve independently. So in terms of the jurisdiction, this is very interesting, it's very unique, because the jurisdiction ratione personae is very unique, but also the jurisdiction ratione materiae.
So I'm just breaking in for a moment there to note that Chiara broke out the Latin, and she mentioned the jurisdicta persona and the jurisdicta materiae, meaning who can be dealt with and exactly what can be dealt with. And later on, she also brings in the tempora, meaning the time period over which any of these claims commissions have some kind of jurisdiction. So then we carry on with lots of different examples.
So, for example, when we think about the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission, it also had jurisdiction to look at violation of international humanitarian law. When we look at the UNCC, it had jurisdiction to hear claims arising from Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. And the claims are very different nature. For example, claims of individuals because they had to flee Kuwait, claims of companies because they lost their investment, claims of states because of environmental damages. And so, for example, for the UNCC, it's quite interesting. There was a division of kind of small claims, individual claims, and also large and complex claims. And the UNCC is also a good example because there you see maybe a claims commission working in a very unique but interesting way, so that priority was given to individual claims of individuals that had to flee Kuwait, and they were also compensated for a set amount. And large and complex claims were heard later, and they were heard in a way, in a process that looked much more like an arbitration, like an international arbitration. And those claims for the UNCC, they were, the UNCC awarded over $50 billion worth of claims, and it heard more than 1.5 million claimants. So these claims commission can be very large and can have very significant jurisdiction.
And also they often cover very specific time periods.
I mean, I think the most important issues are the jurisdiction ratione personae, ratione materiae, but similarly, we also have specific jurisdiction in terms of ratione temporis, right? So what is covered from where, where the claims happened, where the responsibility of the state was engaged. And so in that sense, Claims Commission can be very, very flexible, ad hoc institutions, and then can provide legitimacy and can provide fair compensation and can be just compensation in a very ad hoc way. So this is why that makes it a very interesting instrument. And it's an instrument also that is kind of has a little bit of a renaissance after World War II. We can think about claims commissions as being really going back to almost the Jay Treaty in 1794 between the UK and the US, and they've been used up to World War I and also after World War I for a little bit, including, for example, in the American-Mexican Claims Commissions in 1924 to 1934. And then there was a period where claims commissions were not used as much. But then they were maybe rediscovered with the Iran-US Claims Tribunal, which provided a very, I would also almost say like an unlikely solution for a very unique situation. When we think about Iran and the US, and even now, they're not in the best of terms, but they were able, and the Iran-US Claims Tribunal is still hearing cases in The Hague. And they were able to find a way to agree on a mechanism, on a legitimate and neutral and independent mechanism that could hear claims from a variety of sources.
Really, that just sounds so unlikely, Iran and the US. So how does that actually work?
So, for example, at the Iran-US Claims Tribunal, what is very interesting is that the Iran-US Claims Tribunal hears cases of Iran nationals and the United States against the United States, and also US nationals and the US against Iran, and then Iran against the United States. So you see there are a lot of moving parts there, and it has worked for so many years and has worked very well with awards being paid and with arbitrators coming and deciding on very important issues and very substantial claims for a very long time.
So what do you think it is that actually does make them work? I mean, in a way in which you see other processes often getting gummed up, finding it very difficult to make any progress. Is it because they're so much under the radar?
That's a very good point, actually. It's true. So maybe claims commissions do not get the same news as criminal tribunals, for example. There are a lot of discussions about criminal tribunals. And so maybe that's a reason. But to me, they're equally and even possibly, you can't say it's more important, but they're very important because they provide compensation to the victims, especially to individuals that have suffered, right? So I think, although they're civil issues, they provide monetary compensation, I believe that they have a very, very important role. But I think what is very important for claims commission is that they are, as I said, flexible, and that they have to be created thoughtfully, so that all the moving pieces are thought through very carefully. So claims commissions are successful only if each of the issues that they may confront are considered very specifically and well by international lawyers mostly. Like, this is very much of an international issue, but obviously it's also a political issue, because you also have to have the legitimacy also comes from the political backing. But if you look, for example, at all the different steps that one has to take, first of all, you have to have an international instrument that is valid to create a claims commission.
Does a claims commission actually need to have some kind of a grandfather institution? I mean, generally it has to be under UN auspices, or maybe in somebody else's space?
I don't think so. Because if you think about the past, for example, both looking at Eritrea, Ethiopia, Iran, US, these were bilateral treaties, right? So these were really done, there was an agreement between the parties to do this. And of course, it was part of a peace process. So in the Eritrea, Ethiopia Claims Commission, for example, there was part of a larger peace process, a peace agreement that also included a boundary dispute and also included other issues. For the Iran-US, it's the same thing. There was a peace agreement that included, for example, the release of hostages and the release of, to a certain extent, frozen funds. Right. So there were many issues. These, as I said before, these always come from a situation of an international upheaval, a war or some other very major international event. This is something, the claims commissions do come as a form of reparation, as a form of trying to bring peace, or trying to bring some form of relationship between the parties.
But in some cases, the United Nations Security Council has been involved. I mean, it's been kind of imposed on a country.
Now, there are different kinds of claims commissions also that look, for example, at, if you think about possibly whether they're imposed or not, look at the UNCC. Right, so the UNCC was indeed created as a resolution of the Security Council. And this is a little different. Resolutions of the United Nations are binding, but Iraq at that moment endorsed the UNCC at a later stage, but not when it was created. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that, again, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, it was a very blatant violation of international law. And when you think about violation of international law, then of course you look at the articles of state responsibility that say that if a state violates international law, there are legal consequences. And some of the legal consequences are provision of reparation, which include compensation. So here you have a system that works in that way. One thing that also I think is interesting to note is that Claims Commission may be changed. As I said, they're very flexible and kind of also changed through history. As I said, no Claims Commission is equal to the other. And if you think the very last iteration of almost Claims Commission, look at the United Nations Register of Damages for Palestine, for example, or the more recent one where I sit at the reparation, the register for Ukraine. Those are essentially the first step of maybe a larger claim commission. When you look at UNRWA, the Register of Damages for Palestine, that came from the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the creation of the wall in Israel and Palestine, right at the border. And the advisory opinion said that we have to provide a register. And the register is essentially the first phase that says, okay, these are claims that exist. And then maybe in the second phase, you will create a compensation also to provide compensation for the claims. And this is similar to what we're seeing now in the register for damages for Ukraine. So there's a first phase of registration where you have eligibility criteria, and then a second phase of a compensation mechanism. Right. So the claims commissions are different change. And we also have other claims commissions that exist post fragmentation of Yugoslavia. So they're very flexible and change in many different ways and address very unique issues.
So I'm starting to get my head around how the process actually works. So first you set up a register and then you think about the damages, and only then after that you adjudicate. So what about Ukraine? Where will the money come from, do you think, in the end? I mean, will it come from the frozen assets of Russia? Are we at that stage yet?
So you're right. There's still, so the Ukraine, the register for Ukraine was created very recently. And in fact, the members of the board were elected in November. The secretariat of the register was created a few months earlier. And in fact, we opened for claims submission April 2nd, so very, very recently. And what I think, can I tell you two things about this, because I think it's interesting. When you think about kind of a new structure, the register is also very interesting because it was for the very first time created from the Council of Europe, from a enlarged and partial agreement in the Council of Europe, which makes it very interesting. The statute that was approved by the Council of Europe provided for a compensation mechanism. The register is the first phase of the compensation mechanism, and then you have a compensation mechanism that may include, as the statute provides, a claims commission and a compensation fund. Right? And so you have these second stages that are now being discussed, very early stage now for that to be discussed. And of course, you have to find the funds. This is a very important issue. A claim commission is successful if it provides at the end funds. When you think about the UNCC, the funds were specifically taken directly, really from Iraq, from the oil for food, and they were directed to the UNCC. In the Iran-US claims tribunal, it was very interesting also because Iran agreed to provide certain funds, frozen funds for the compensation, and agreed also to have to continue to replenish that fund. For Ukraine, you're right, the funds are not available yet, and you have the frozen funds. It is possible that frozen funds will be used. I know there have been many discussions. There are discussions now. There are discussions about whether, how to do it. This is also a national decision because it's going to be domestic. It is also possible that in the future, Russia may come to the table and provide funds itself. So there are many ways in which this can be done. And one might be the one to use the frozen funds. discussions are, I think, ongoing, but not resolved. This is a domestic issue also, as well as an international issue.
Do you mean it's a domestic issue for Ukraine, or do you mean it's a domestic issue in each of the countries where the funds are based?
No, domestic where the funds are. So where are the funds? You have $300 billion that are frozen, and they're frozen in different jurisdictions, and every jurisdiction has different rules about what to do. So the fact that they're frozen, I think under international law, it's really, there's not an issue. This is happened. Whether they can be repurposed, or maybe they can be used, or they can be seized, these are different. This is a different issue. There are many theories that are being discussed, and one of the theories is the idea of countermeasures, meaning that you can possibly use the frozen fund as you can seize the frozen fund as a countermeasure, again using the Articles of State Responsibility, saying that this is a possibly countermeasures because Russia has an obligation. Maybe states can use part of the funds until Russia does it itself. So there are many theories, legal theories, that are now being circulated and being discussed on possibly how to fund the compensation fund.
I imagine on Ukraine, you're kind of in for the long haul yourself. You would expect to be involved for quite some time. So how long were you previously involved in other claims commissions? How long do you think this will take? I mean, do you know what kind of period I'll expect to be watching this for?
This is a very interesting question. The register for Ukraine was created very, very expeditiously for international law standard. As I said, it was initially kind of approved by the Council of Europe in July of last year. It was discussed and suggested in the General Assembly resolution of November of the previous year. So in terms of international law, this has been very, very fast. And the initial mandate that the register has, or the board has, is for 3 years, renewable ones. Hopefully this can be resolved quickly. Now, when you think about, in general, about other claims commission, the length of time is very different. In the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission, for example, there were, in the statute and in the agreement itself, there was a willingness of the parties to do this in a very expeditious way. And there were very, very strict timelines for both parties' submissions and the boards to decide. And that was almost like respected. I mean, it was, in a sense, it was very quick. That said, but opposite, the Iran-US Claims Tribunal is still hearing cases, and it was created in 1981 and is still hearing cases. Now there are only some remaining ones, but it's still there. So I think it depends very much on what the parties want and how the agreement is also reached. And this is why I was saying also you have to look at every step, how it is created, what is the instrument, what is the scope, what kind of administrative support you need, who are the judges, who are the arbitrators, what is the process that is adopted.
So do each individual claim for each person get judged, or is it kind of an automated process depending on what the basics are for each person's claim?
In general, there's a different process for individual claims, and this is expeditious and normally done in a mass claims fashion, meaning that it is very expedite and is used almost electronically. But then for bigger claims, you have to have ensure that the process is also legitimate, and so you have to maybe ensure more of a kind of an arbitration-like process. And then, of course, you have to look at the awards and an enforcement of the proceeding of the enforcement of the awards itself. So the parties and the agreement itself also play a role in how long the process lasts. So in the Ukraine example, is 3 years for the board, initially 3 years and possible other 3 years. But it is possible also that we have the Claims Commission being created soon and possibly the fund. One issue also is when you think about the UNCC now is completely done. It was created in 1991 and everything was decided and paid, also lasted a couple of decades. But there you have the mechanism, the administration was very complex. You have a lot of commissioners, you have a structure that mirrored the Security Council that looked at the awards also. So this was, somebody would say, they call it a thick claim commission rather than a thin claim commission, where, for example, in the Eritrea-Ethiopia Claims Commission, you only had 5 arbitrators, 5 commissioners. In the Ukraine one, you only have 7. So there are a lot of ways in which you can make it more or less expedite. And this is also part of the choice and mostly part of the initial agreement.
Why did you get yourself involved in this? I mean, if you look around to Google who to talk about claims commissions, it's really all Chiara. It's all you as the claims commissions person. So why is that?
I just find it very, very interesting and also challenging and satisfactory. Interesting because you have a lot of the elements of international law that can be challenging in the sense, so you have a violation of international law, you have an international dispute mechanism that exists, and most of the time it actually works. And it works by delivering justice to individuals also. That I find very fascinating, that it can immediately provide compensation to individuals that have suffered the most. For example, in the UNCC, those who have been displaced, right, though they had to leave. And in terms of international dispute, so I'm interested in international dispute resolution in general. And I find this mechanism with their flexibility and the fact that you can target it to the specific cases very interesting. And also, just because they provide a unique way to provide justice to different claimants. And I think it is a mechanism that if it's used well, it's a unique mechanism as an international dispute resolution mechanism, because it provides unique compensation, that has a very specific and unique results for individuals, positive outcomes for individuals. You can think about, I know you have an excerpt so just for 30 seconds, if you think about possible other claims commission, you can use claims commission. For example, you have a lot of discussions about climate change. You can think about claims commissions also possibly for climate change or other situations where you have a responsibility of a state that is engaged, then you have a very large number of individuals who have suffered because of that violation of international law. Because I was also lucky to meet, when I was at NYU, I met a professor who was involved in claims commission and asked me to help her, Professor Ringmeier. And so I began also working with that. So there's interest, but also opportunities. And I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity.
So to become the Batman of claims commissions, my goodness, I'm really mixing my popular metaphors here with Ghostbusters up at the top and Batman down at the bottom. You really have to have the opportunity to do so and the interest. And that's it. After that, they just keep on calling you. And they say, hey, Chiara, here's another claims commission. Do you want to help out?
Yeah, it seems like you really talk to the right person who knows all about claims commissions and how they work and what they do. So I think it was really good 101 of what has happened before, what can we maybe expect that will happen in Ukraine. We see the same thing with her that we see in international law a lot, that if you do one thing successfully, one claims commission successfully, or one international court successfully, then you just keep popping up at all the other claims commissions or international courts. It's a bit of not a merry-go-round, but a perpetual loop of the same people. But that makes it very handy also for us journalists, because we know who to call. And if for claims commissions, it's Chiara.
That's right. I would also say it was good for me to have the chance to do a 101 kind of episode. I have heard from quite a lot of people over the last few months how much they appreciate those basic introductory podcasts from us. Sometimes we get far too caught up in the news to be able to do them. And sometimes we're too interested in all of the main detail to do them. But I think it's something we should keep in mind and just encourage listeners, reach out to us if there's something you want us to do a 101 on, then we can try and arrange it and try and get that done from you. But we'll keep an eye on this idea of a Ukraine Claims Commission, which, as we heard in our previous podcast on the Registry of Damages, is actually beginning to happen at the moment. And The Hague, of course, is the place.
Yeah, I'm going to be in work doing this kind of things for a long while if all those different initiatives come to full fruition. So that is, I don't know if that's good. In a way, my work is a bit messed up that it's good for me if they have registers of damages or wars that need international court. So I have some ambivalence there.
I understand that. I'd just like also to give a shout out. We'll put in the show notes that I've seen some discussion about whether there should be a new register of damages for Palestine as part of any deal that comes in the future. So, as you say, Steph, I think your job will carry on for quite some time.
This was Asymmetrical Haircuts, your international justice podcast, created and presented by Janet Anderson and Stephanie van den Berg. This episode has been recorded at home, but we'd like to give a shout out to our regular host, Humanity Hub in The Hague. Music is by audionautics.com, and you can find show notes and everything about the podcast on asymmetricalhaircuts.com. This show is available on every major podcast service, so please subscribe, give us a rating, and spread the word.